Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so glad to be here with all of you tonight. Glad to be back home, home sweet home. I'll be here for another week. So, yeah, we're going to have a great conversation tonight. Prepared a great message for you all tonight. So, I'm looking forward to it. So, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Let's do it. Let's have a great stream tonight.
Century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, 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 everybody. So glad to have you all here with us tonight. I've been traveling. I was just in San Francisco for a week covering the APEC Summit. Found my way back to New York City, and I'll be here for a week. I'll be here for a week and a half, basically, and then I'm off to Portland because we are having our Center for Political Innovation National Convention that is happening on December 2nd. Not going to say too much about it. I'll talk about it later on the show, but that's happening December 2nd. So I'm back in New York City for this week of Thanksgiving. And then I'm headed to Portland. The other thing I wanted to mention, I had the idea today. I was talking to my wife about it, was talking to other people in CPI about it. I'm thinking that on Thanksgiving, because it is a holiday and I don't have to work because it's a holiday, so I won't be interrupted by my job. Because both my wife and I were staying home, we've got some plans to have a nice Thanksgiving with ourselves. I am thinking that on Thanksgiving, I will do a marathon stream. I will do 8 hours of streaming on Thanksgiving. That is my goal. 4 hours in the morning and 4 hours in the night. I am going to try to do a Thanksgiving epic marathon. I am going to try to do 4 and 4. I'm going to see if I can do it. If I can do 8 hours of streaming on Thanksgiving. I have never done 8 hours of streaming in a single day before, but I'm thinking I can do it. So if you all think it would be worth your time, please come by. I am looking to do 4 and 4, 8 hours of streaming total on Thanksgiving as a way to, get myself in the zone, get myself pumped up for Portland. So yeah, wish me luck with that. We'll see. We'll see if I'm able to pull it off, right? I'm thinking I'll get up at an early time and just start my streaming, do 4 hours, and then, have a nice dinner with my wife. She's we're not doing the traditional Thanksgiving. We're probably just going to have some mashed potatoes and steak sandwiches or steak or something like that. And my wife and I will observe the Thanksgiving holiday here at home. And then once it's dark outside, I'll be back on here, and then I'll try to do another 4 hours of streaming. Let's see if I can do it. 4 and 4 for Thanksgiving. That is my plan. Let's see if I can fulfill. A marathon day of streaming on Thanksgiving. Don't watch the parade. Watch me. All right, everybody. But the way this works, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. The way this works is I give my opening remarks, which is what I have planned to talk about. Then from there, after I give my opening remarks, we do a roll call where we find out who it is on the other side of the camera. And then after that, I answer your questions for the rest of the night. So if you got something you want me to talk about in the second half of our show, by all means, send me a super chat or a Rockfin tip or a Rumble rant. Send me some means of asking your question, and I will do my best to answer it in the second half of our show. That's the way it works. So, yeah, I'm just going to jump right into my opening remarks tonight because I got a lot to talk about with you all. A lot of things we can talk about. Quick news update, just a couple news items. This was great news, I thought. The Postal Workers Union, and shout out to Bill from the United States who sent this to me. The Postal Workers Union, a major working class labor union in the United States representing postal workers, has decided that they will call for a ceasefire in Gaza. All right, and that's a really big deal. A working class labor union. Look how multinational that picture is, right? We got, there's a white dude, there's a African American woman, there's an Asian woman there, and I mean, they have passed a resolution as a labor union calling for an end to the bombardment of Gaza, and I think that is really, really tremendous that the National Postal Workers Union has done that. Just wanted to get that out there. In other news, Yemen has seized an Israeli ship. The revolutionary forces of Yemen, the Houthi movement, they saw an Israeli ship passing through, and they seized it in support of the Palestinians because they say Israel's at war with the Palestinians and that they are on the side of the Palestinians. And so, that's a pretty big deal as well. Israel's blaming Iran for it. They're not even trying to talk about revolutionary forces in Yemen. They're blaming Iran for it, so that you have that as well. So those are two news items that are worth mentioning. We have the ongoing bombardment of Gaza. All eyes are on Gaza. But for my message tonight, folks, I wanted to draw from history, as I often do, to help us understand the present. I think it was Mark Twain who said, history does not repeat itself, but it often rhymes. Meaning that it's not the same thing happens again because it's in a different time, different circumstances, etc. But it happens in a similar way. Or that by understanding the past, we can understand the time that we are currently living in. And so tonight, I'm going to talk about a number of times in history that similar things occurred in different countries, in different circumstances. And we are going to use those different times and different circumstances to understand what's happening in the United States of America right now. Now, often on these streams, I talk about the American Civil War, and we're going to talk about the American Civil War. Often on these streams, I talk about the Soviet Union, and we are going to talk about the Soviet Union. We're going to talk about the Russian Revolution. But tonight, on this stream, we are going to go even further back. We are going to go way, way back. We are going to go back thousands of years. We are going to go back to 600 BC. That's a long time. We are going to go back thousands of years to talk about Jeremiah. All right. This book is quite popular. It's been around for quite some time. People have been studying it. Some of the greatest works of literature are full of allusions to this book. And this book has a New Testament and it has an Old Testament. And in its Old Testament, you can find the book of Jeremiah. And the book of Jeremiah is not short. There's an audio book of it that I was listening to today as I was exercising at the gym. And that audio book of just someone speaking the words of the book of Jeremiah is 4.5 hours long. Not a short book, but it's very important. And what is described in the book of Jeremiah is very, very, very interesting and very relevant in our time, as is the U.S. Civil War, as is the Soviet Union. It's all very, very relevant. So let's talk about 600 BC, the book of Jeremiah. Let's talk about it. Folks, every society in history has been held together by a social contract. There are certain rules the society lives by, and those rules hold the society together. Certain things we all agree that we're going to do. There are certain things we all agree that we are not going to do. And society is held together by a social contract, by an agreement between people. There are principles and beliefs that lay the foundation for that society. And those principles and beliefs hold that society together. Ancient Israel was just like any other society in that it had certain foundations and principles that held it together. And those foundations were the Torah. Right? They had the 10 Commandments. They had the law of Moses. They had the Leviticus, all of that. That's how they held their society together. And they learned over the course of hundreds of years of existence that if you have a society where everyone prays to one God, you don't have any other gods. You have a society where everyone honors the Sabbath, and the Sabbath is the day of rest. You have a society where the family is held together and people follow certain rules and there's certain obligations people have unto each other. You can be quite prosperous. And ancient Israel was quite prosperous. Had a very beautiful temple they built in Jerusalem, had a very effective society. They held their society together. It was functioning. However, at the time of the prophet Jeremiah, there was an understanding that the foundations upon which the ancient kingdom of Israel had been established, those foundations were being eroded. The society was starting to come apart. And this comes across, if you read the book of Jeremiah, which is basically a transcription of the poetry of Jeremiah, of the teachings of Jeremiah, accounts of Jeremiah's life, written down by the scribe Baruch. Baruch wrote down about the life of Jeremiah. And at the time that Jeremiah was alive, there was a feeling that Israel was moving away from the foundations, the social contract that held the society together. People were not following the rules and not living according to the principles upon which the society was founded. And they did this in a number of different ways. And the ways in which people strayed and were betraying the principles upon which the kingdom of ancient Israel was established are quite interesting. And I will show you some of them on the screen. Jeremiah comes along and he's calling out the society he lives in. He's saying that they have begun living in ways that are not moral. This is Jeremiah 5:26-27. For among my people are found wicked men. They lay wait as he that setteth snares. They set a trap, they catch men. As a cage is full of birds, so are their houses full of deceit. Therefore they become great and waxen rich. They are waxen fat. They shine, yea, they overpass the deeds of the wicked. They judge not the cause of the fatherless, and yet they prosper. Now, what in the world is this talking about? This is very interesting. The story behind this is fascinating. For among my people are found wicked men, and they lay wait, and they setteth snares, they set a trap, they catch men. What was this about? Well, it was about the fact that the rich people in the kingdom of Israel were using unpaid labor to build their luxurious mansions. The law of Moses says that if you hire somebody to work, you have to pay them. But they found loopholes in the law through which they could force poor people to work for free. And so the wealthy people in the kingdom of Israel were getting together and figuring out ways that they could manipulate the poor people into building luxurious mansions for them and not pay them. They basically had a prison industrial complex. They found loopholes in the law, loopholes, you broke a rule, and they would force poor people to work for them for free. That was one of the things that was happening. Through loopholes in the law, through other technicalities, they were able to create a situation where lots of poor people were compelled to build houses for rich people without compensation for their labor. That was one of the examples, just one of the examples of how it was when they were straying from the teachings. But I will show you another passage from Jeremiah. I will share with you yet another verse from the book of Jeremiah that is related to all of this. Hold on. This particular passage refers to what I was telling you about earlier. On how they were forcing poor people to build their luxurious mansions for free. This is the words of Jeremiah. He said, I'm sorry, that's not a very good screenshot. Sorry about that. I have a better screenshot. Hold on. Hold your horses, as they say. Hold your horses. Here we go. Here's the better screenshot. All right. I've got a better screenshot that has all the text I wanted to include. All right. Here we go. It's got the whole verse on it. Sorry, wrong screenshot. He's referring to the fact that they were using forced labor to build their mansions. And he says, "Woe unto him that buildeth his house by unrighteousness, and his chambers by wrong, that useth his neighbor's service without wages, and giveth him not for his work. That saith, I will build me a wide house and large chambers, and cutteth him out windows, and it is sealed with cedar and painted with vermilion. Shalt thou reign because thou closest thyself in cedar? Did not thy father eat and drink and do judgment and justice, and then it was well with him? He judged the cause of the poor and needy, and then it was well with him. Was not this to know me, said the Lord? But thine eyes and thine heart are not but for thy covetousness, and for to shed innocent blood, and for oppression, and for violence, and do it. Therefore saith the Lord concerning Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judea." So what's going on here? Jeremiah, the prophet, comes along, and he calls out a lot of evil things that he's seeing in ancient Israel. And he's saying one of these things is the rich people are building luxurious mansions for themselves with the forced labor of the poor people. And this isn't right. They're setting traps for men. They're using loopholes in the law to force the poor people to work with them for free. And they're building these beautiful houses. But they're not paying the people who they hired to build the house. They're not paying their labor. And they may think that they're rich. They may think that they have all this luxury, but it's built on immorality. It's built on robbing the poor. It's built on not paying people for their labor. That's one of the things that the prophet Jeremiah is calling out. What else is the prophet Jeremiah calling out? This is an interesting one. Oh, that's the one I just showed you. All right. There's other things he's calling out. Calling out let me get the right slide here. He says, "For the children of Judah have done evil in my sight, saith the Lord. They have set their abominations in the house which is called by my name, to pollute it. They have built the high places of Tophet, which is in the valley of the son of Hinnom, to burn their sons and their daughters in the fire, which I have commanded them not, neither came it into my heart." Now, what is he talking about here? So in addition to the fact that the rich people are using forced labor in order to build luxurious mansions for themselves, many of the people in Israel, ancient Israel, the kingdom of Israel, are not worshiping the one true God. They have built temples up on the hills to other gods, to pagan gods, and they are practicing human sacrifices at these temples. They are sacrificing, burning their sons and their daughters in these temples. They are taking their children and they are burning them in order to get favors from pagan gods. Now, when you think about that, there's a couple things that need to come to mind. First of all, why would anyone do such a thing? All right? You're already living in Israel where they say you can only worship one God. That's the law of the land. But not only are these people violating that law and worshiping some other God, But in order to get a favor from this other god, they are taking their own children, their own offspring, and burning them. Why would people engage in such a horrendous thing, in such horrendous acts? They would kill their own children in a ritual to worship some foreign deity. Well, they did it because they believed it would give them some kind of advance. All right, the mindset behind human sacrifices is interesting. The idea behind any sacrifice is you take something that's very valuable to you and you destroy it. You offer it up to the deity, and the deity, the god, gives you something in exchange. And so these wealthy people, the richest of the rich in the ancient kingdom of Israel, they weren't getting enough from their own god. Their own god, the God of Israel, wasn't doing enough for them. So they found another god, and they made a deal with this other god that in order to get some kind of advance, in order to make more money, in order to enrich themselves more, they would take one of their children and burn them in a ceremony to this other god. Now, what's important to understand about this is anyone who's ever been a parent knows the love that they have for their child. So to take your own child and burn them requires one to psychologically kill the empathy within one's soul. Now, there's part of you, there has to be, that sees one's own child, that loves one's own child. But yet, that empathy, that love, that connection that one has to one's own offspring, they're overriding it. The callous, selfish part of their mind that says, I am going to put myself first. I am going to make some more money. I need this pagan deity to make my crops grow. I need this pagan deity to help me make more money. I am going to override the love that I have as a parent, and I am going to burn my own child, kill them in the most painful way I can in order to make more money. And that is what people in the ancient kingdom of Israel were doing. Not only were they using forced labor in order to build their luxurious mansions, but on top of that, they were sacrificing their own children because they believed it would get them favor, that the God of Israel wasn't enough for them. So they found some other spirits, some other deities. There was a spirit named Baal and the golden calf and all of that. And they were trying to get some favors from these other gods. So they would take one of their own children and burn them up in the hills. And Jeremiah sees this, and he's horrified by it. And Jeremiah is somebody who just from the time of he's a small child, there's something about him. He has an ability to speak. The words of God come through him. He gets into a trance and he just starts talking. And he's just this very spiritual, religious person. And he sees what's going on in Israel. He sees the human sacrifices, and he sees the forced labor. And he says this is wrong, and he's just motivated by a sense of justice, and God's spirit speaks through him, and he won't shut up about it. And at first, the king, Josiah, actually kind of likes Jeremiah because the king is also realizing, King Josiah is a good king, And the message that Jeremiah is giving, he says, if we continue this, if we continue to stray from the principles of our society, if we continue to break the covenant that we made with God, if we continue to break the social contract, if we continue to stray from the social contract that holds our society together, if we continue to do this, we're going to be conquered. And that's what flows through the book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah is saying, if we don't stop doing these evil things, if we don't stop sacrificing our children, if we don't stop enslaving our people and setting traps for men and trapping people to be slave laborers, if we don't stop this evil, our country is going to come apart, because a strong country is a country where parents love their children. A strong country is one where people don't enslave other people to exploit their labor. A strong country is one where we don't set traps to try and imprison other people and force them to do labor in order to enrich the wealthiest among us. And that these crimes that were a violation of the Torah, a violation of the covenant that was the foundation of Israel, these crimes that were being committed were separating the people of the kingdom from each other. They were no longer loyal to each other. Would you be loyal to somebody who enslaves you and traps you and finds some loophole in the law to make you their slave to build their mansion? Of course not. Do you think people could love each other when they're burning and sacrificing their own children? Of course not. The society is coming apart. And the king Josiah sees this, and he sees that there's foreign armies that want to conquer them. And he's saying, if we're going to have enough solidarity as a country to resist the foreign invader, we've got to stop doing this. And so this guy, Jeremiah, this kid comes along who, is possessed of the Spirit of God and starts preaching about this. And the king says, I like this guy. King Josiah promotes Jeremiah, and he sends Jeremiah everywhere. And Jeremiah is telling everybody to repent. And this is Bonapartism. There was a division in the ruling class. Some in the ruling class wanted to continue their human sacrifices. Some in the ruling class were very happy to continue using slave labor. However, the king represented another faction in the ruling class that said, oh no, if we're going to defeat the invaders, we have to stay true to our covenant. We have to hold our country together. And so he found an agitator, a radical, a rabble-rouser among the people, Jeremiah, and said, in order to get the rest of the ruling class in order to get the other rich people, the decadent rich, in order, Jeremiah needs to stir up the masses of people. He needs to stir up the masses of people in a mass religious revival movement in order to get our society back into order so we cannot be invaded. Jeremiah is a radical. He's an agitator. He's a guy who goes around stirring up the people. He sees the slave labor and he's saying, this is wrong. This is a violation of the principles of our society. Jeremiah sees human sacrifices and killing children and burning them on altars to false gods. And he says, this is wrong. We've got to stop it. And King Josiah likes Jeremiah because King Josiah agrees with Jeremiah. And what is Jeremiah constantly saying? If we keep doing this, a foreign nation is going to come and take us over. That is his message. If we continue to act this way, a foreign nation is going to take us over. And he says it's not guaranteed. He says, for if you thoroughly amend your ways and your doings, and if you execute judgment between a man and his neighbor, if you oppress not the stranger, and the stranger means the foreigner, by the way. Many of the translations refer to the foreigner, right? That means people that are in the country that aren't from there. If you oppress not the stranger, if you oppress not the fatherless and the widow, and if you shed not innocent blood in his place, and neither walk after the gods to hurt you, then I will cause you to dwell in this place, in this land that I gave to your father forever and ever. Behold, ye trust in lying words that cannot profit. So he's saying, if you can stop oppressing people, if you can repent, if you can turn from your sinful ways, if you can stop doing these evil things, We can stay in this land. However, he's saying, if we continue doing this, our country is going to come apart and we are going to be conquered. And in order to hold our society together, it is necessary that we stop doing these evil things because it's tearing our society apart. This is the book of Jeremiah. I think I showed you everything. But what do we know? We know that Josiah, he eventually died. And that another king came into power. And yet another king came into power. And the new king who came into power, one of these new kings who came into power, he actually really liked the child sacrificing. He thought it was fine. And this king that came in, he liked the slave labor and the exploitation. And so this new king who came in, who was with the other faction among the rich people, the ones who didn't want to have mass repentance, the ones who weren't motivated by their nationalism to try and get the country in order, he found false prophets. He found prophets of his own that would go around and say it's okay. And so Jeremiah, he's going around and he's saying, I have the Spirit of God within me. I know that we can't keep sacrificing people. I know that we can't keep exploiting people for labor, etc. But this new king comes in and he finds some false prophets. And they go around saying, actually, it's okay to do that. And Jeremiah is put into stocks and pillory. They put him into a pillory. Do you know what that is? You know what a pillory is? I'll show you a picture. They put Jeremiah into a pillory. Jeremiah is put into a pillory as his punishment for daring speak up against the king. Right? That's like from Puritan times they had these. It was a way to humiliate somebody. You put them in this thing and people throw fruit at them, etc. So Jeremiah is put into a pillory. And meanwhile, they've got these false prophets going around telling everybody, no, it's fine. We can keep doing what we want to do. They put Jeremiah into a pillory. Some of Jeremiah's followers are hanged and killed. And the kingdom of Israel continues exploiting foreign labor. The kingdom of Israel continues the practice of sacrificing children, burning them in a temple. But Jeremiah keeps preaching. And so many times they conspire to kill him. And he's got mobs of poor people who love him and think he's telling the truth and think the country needs to repent, but the government is against him. The first king, Josiah, promoted him, was kind of a Bonapartist who was trying to stabilize the kingdom of Israel so they could defeat invaders. However, other kings don't want to hear what Jeremiah has to say, and he continues to face persecution. He's thrown into a pillory. He says, thus says the Lord, do justice and righteousness, and deliver from the hand of the oppressor him who has been robbed. And do no wrong or violence to the resident alien, to the fatherless, to the widow, nor shed innocent blood in this place. He's saying that those who are orphan children, women who don't have a man to take care of them, people from foreign countries, that is who you need to care for. You need to care for those who are struggling. And that you can't prey upon the weak. That you have a responsibility to what they talk about, the least among us. He's saying that you have to love your fellow human beings. You have to treat them with respect. But the rich are worshiping Baal, and they're so selfish and so caught up in their own selfishness and have so little empathy and so little compassion that they can sacrifice their own children and burn their own children in these pagan ceremonies because they think it'll give them good luck, it'll make their profits go up. Well, what happens? The Babylonians invade, and the kingdom of Israel is destroyed. And the people living there are all forcibly deported. And the temple is destroyed. And Jeremiah is saying, I told you all, you didn't listen to me. I told you that this was what would happen. But you listened to the false prophets. You listened to the kings. You listened to your own greed and your own covetousness, your own desire to make money, your own desire to advance, your own selfishness. And you betrayed the covenant. You broke the principles upon which our society was founded. And I told you over and over and over again, and it's not a short book, it's a very, very long book. I told you over and over again that if you did this, our nation would be destroyed. And the nation was destroyed. And as the nation is destroyed, there's many people that go, wow, Jeremiah was right. And that's why we have the book of Jeremiah in the Bible today, is because they said, we've got to find somebody to write down what this guy said. He was right the whole time. He told us that if we did not repent of our ways, if we continued the human sacrifices, if we continued the forced labor, if we continued all of this, if we continued to live in greed, if we continued to mistreat the resident aliens, people from other places who came to our land, if we continued to exploit them, if we stopped caring for the orphans of our society, if we stopped caring for the widows, if we didn't learn to have compassion and kindness, our society was going to come apart. And it did. Jeremiah was right. And so they found Baruch, and Baruch wrote down the message. And that's why we have the book of Jeremiah, because they realized he was right. He predicted the overthrow, the conquest of Israel by the Babylonians. He explained why it was going to happen. He built a mass movement saying it's time to change our ways. And at first, he was supported by the King Josiah, because the King Josiah wanted to get ancient Israel in order. But new kings came in. They didn't want to hear the message. And Jeremiah was persecuted. And eventually, it led to the downfall of the nation. Now, that's the book of Jeremiah. Go and read it for yourself. Fascinating read. Jeremiah was a revolutionary. He was an agitator. He was an organizer. And he said, we are doing evil things in our society, and the evil things that we are doing are eroding the foundations of our civilization. We are becoming selfish. We are becoming greedy. We are not loving each other. We're taking advantage of people. We're exploiting people. We're sacrificing our own children just because we think it'll give us some more money. We got to stop doing this, because if not, our society is going to come apart. And they didn't listen to him. And it wasn't until it happened they realized he was right. And now his message has been written down. You can go read the book of Jeremiah for yourself. It's fascinating. Fascinating history. Because it's very similar to some other things that I'm about to tell you about. Right? I told you we started with Jeremiah. Well, now, fast forward to the United States of America. Not now, in the 1800s, when this country was founded, won its independence from the British. Among the people who started this country, there was a very, very big disagreement. Many of the founding fathers, Patrick Henry, Alexander Hamilton, many of the founding fathers of this country were very opposed to slavery. They knew that slavery was wrong. However, there were other founders who had huge plantations. George Washington had a huge slave plantation. He was the richest man in the 13 colonies. Thomas Jefferson had a huge slave plantation. Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, a lot of the founders of the United States were huge slave owners. However, among the more radical of the founding fathers, people like Thomas Paine, Patrick Henry, people like that, they understood life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That doesn't allow for slavery. And that was a really big point of disagreement among the founders of the United States. Is slavery okay or is it not okay? And we know that Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, they were morally conflicted about slavery. They practiced it. Let you know that both of them, from what I understand, freed all their slaves upon their death. Which people look at that and they think, what's going on there? Right? They had huge plantations full of slaves, but they kind of knew it was wrong. And so they wrote into their wills, when I die, once I'm dead and I don't need them anymore, all of my slaves can be free. And that's what Thomas Jefferson did. That's what George Washington did. Well, what is that? If you're really against slavery, you should free your slaves while you're not alive. You shouldn't wait till you're dead to free all your slaves. But in Virginia, in the 1700s, if you didn't have any slaves, you didn't have any power. All of their wealth and their power, they were in Virginia. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, they were in Virginia. And in Virginia, if you wanted to be a wealthy, powerful person in Virginia, that meant you had a really big tract of land with a lot of slaves working it. And so they weren't going to give up their wealth and power. And they knew slavery was wrong. Thomas Jefferson knew slavery was wrong, but he wasn't going to give up his slaves. George Washington knew slavery was wrong, but he wasn't going to give up his slaves. Now, the people in the North, Patrick Henry, Thomas Paine, others, they didn't practice slavery. They were opposed to slavery 100%. And we also know there were a lot of other founders of the United States who were just huge slave owners who didn't feel anything morally conflicting about it at all. They were just like, yeah, slavery's fine. What's the problem? They didn't have an issue with slavery. But it's fair to say that when this country was founded, amid all of the rhetoric about freedom, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, human rights, the rights of man, all of this, there was this ugly, ugly curse hanging over it all called slavery. And they reached an agreement that after a certain time, there would be no more slave importations to the United States. That was like a compromise they reached. So after so long, no new slaves can come in from Africa. That was one of their agreements. And they thought that would eventually lead to slavery going away because there would be no new slaves that would come in and more slaves would get free, and eventually slavery would just fade away. That's what they told themselves. They said, well, we didn't get rid of slavery, but we banned the importation of new slaves. And so it's only going to be a matter of time, but eventually slavery will go away. Well, that was self-deceit. That was self-deceit. And as the United States progressed, at the War of 1812, fought the British Empire once again. As the United States progressed, it became very clear there were two economies emerging in the United States. One was the economy of the North, which was industrial. They were building factories. They were advancing new technology. And one was the economy of the South. And the economy of the South was the British Empire's cotton supplier. The British Empire needed cheap cotton for their textile mills. And the cotton for the British textile mills could be very cheap if the people working to make the textile, to make the cotton, were getting paid nothing. And so the United States had two economies. There was the slave plantation economy of the South, which supplied the British Empire with cheap cotton. And there was the emerging industrial economy of the North. And you had a lot of small farmers. They called free soilers, who weren't rich enough to have huge plantations. They didn't have slaves. They were against slavery, but they started their own land, homesteaders, etc. The free soilers. But the way our Constitution is set up, where every state gets 2 senators, no matter how big it is, where black people, slaves, count for 3/5 of a human being under the U.S. Constitution. So the slave states get overrepresentation. That northern industrial economy was getting squashed because the power of the slaveholders was inflated. They ran the Supreme Court, they ran the Senate, they ran the government, because the way the Electoral College and the U.S. Constitution and the way the U.S. Constitution was set up, the slaveholders had a grip on power. Their power was inflated. Their slaves, they didn't get to vote, but they counted as 3/5 of a human being. Every state, no matter how big it is, no matter how big the population is, gets 2 senators. The Supreme Court was very thoroughly in the hands of the slave owners. The slave owners had the power. And Wall Street was on the side of the slave owners, because the main way that Wall Street made money before the New York Stock Exchange was created was it was a center of insurance. They would insure the ships that sent, to the British Empire, that sent the cotton back to the British. They made money through an insurance racket. They also made money speculating, loaning money to, various slave-related enterprises. So Wall Street was on the side of the slaveholders. The Southern plantation system and the Southern states had inflated representation in the federal government. However, this was hurting the economy of the United States. A lot of the wealthy capitalists in the North were seeing that the laws were being written in ways that were not benefiting them. Now you have the Dred Scott ruling that basically said that non-slave states had an obligation to catch runaway slaves and send them back to slave states. The Dred Scott ruling said, you're a slave in one part of the United States, you're a slave in every part. And with the Fugitive Slave Act and all kinds of laws, all the non-slave states who don't agree with slavery are being forced to cooperate with slavery in one way or another. They're being forced to send slaves back with the Fugitive Slave Act. The slaveholders have this grip on power in Washington, D.C., and the British Empire is backing them up. And so what happens? what happens? Well, among the population, there's a mass religious revival movement, the Second Great Awakening. One faction in the ruling class sees that the country overall is being hurt by the practice of slavery and that it's got to stop. And so they find some agitators. They find some rabble rousers. They find some preachers, some organizers. And among the population of the United States, you have what's called the Second Great Awakening, where there's this mass religious revival movement among the population condemning the practice of slavery, saying that slavery goes against the Bible, slavery goes against the founding principles of America, that America must repent from its evil practice of slavery. It's got to stop acting this way. If it continues to act this way, the country will come apart. We're holding ourselves back. The Second Great Awakening is this mass religious movement that sweeps the United States of America. It has had a heavy impact on the culture, etc., and it's dedicated to opposing slavery. And all kinds of radical abolitionist movements are formed. The Underground Railroad is formed to help slaves flee to Canada where they can get their freedom. All kinds of abolitionist organizations are formed. And you have this radical movement, this radicalism among the population in order to oppose the power of the slaveholders. One section of the ruling class is fighting another section of the ruling class. So it mobilizes a mass movement among the people, a lot like Jeremiah, a mass movement among the people. It says, we've got to stop this evil practice of slavery. But as you know, the bulk of the ruling class, the slaveholders, they just aren't going to hear it. And so along comes a guy named John Brown. And John Brown is a fanatic. He's a religious believer, a fanatical religious believer. He decides to lead an armed uprising against slavery. And he seizes Harper's Ferry, his famous raid on Harper's Ferry. He seizes the armory at Harper's Ferry. He has a standoff with federal troops. There's an armed insurrection. Eventually, he's arrested. He's put on trial. He's the first American ever to be convicted and executed for treason. What does John Brown say at his trial? John Brown says, had I so interfered in behalf of the rich, the powerful, the intelligent, the so-called great, or in behalf of their friends, and suffered and sacrificed what I had in this interference, every man in this court would have deemed it worthy of reward rather than punishment. Meaning that if he had gone and, fought a war with Mexico to expand slavery in the Mexican-American War, they would have rewarded him for that. If he had gone and killed some abolitionists, they would have rewarded him for that. If he'd have gone and captured some slaves who had run away, they would have rewarded him for that. But he fought for the poor. He fought for the oppressed. He fought for the slaves. He fought for the needy, for the fatherless, for the widows, for the hungry, for the resident alien. He fought for those who are downtrodden. And because of that, they don't deem him worthy of reward. He gets the death penalty. He becomes the first person ever executed for treason in American history because he organized an armed uprising against slavery. And what does he say before he gets the death penalty? Fascinating. Just like the prophet Jeremiah. What did Jeremiah say? If we don't repent from our ways, our whole country is going to be conquered and all that. What does John Brown say before he gets executed? He says, I, John Brown, am now quite certain that the crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away but with blood. He basically says, we're going to have a civil war now. And this is what he says before he gets hanged. He says, I, John Brown, am quite certain that the crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away but with blood. He's saying, look, you wouldn't change. You wouldn't repent from your ways. I came along to try and stop this evil practice of slavery, and you're giving me the death penalty, right? Jeremiah just got put in a pillory, and they tried to kill him and failed. But John Brown, on the other hand, he gets hanged for trying to stop slavery. And he says, well, I warned you. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. And there's going to be a big, huge civil war, right? And that's what happened, right? There's a very famous painting of John Brown. John Brown, the last moments of John Brown. I don't know if you've ever seen this painting, right? They've robbed our history from us. They do not teach history in American schools, right? The last moments. They do not teach history in American schools. It is criminal how they don't teach history in American schools. But this is a painting. Here we go. Here's a version I can show you. This is John Brown before he gets the death penalty. Right? He's being led to be hanged. He's surrounded by the army, and there's a black child being held by her mother. He's kissing the black child before he's getting the death penalty. Right? John Brown is basically a prophet. He's basically Jeremiah. He's coming along. He's a radical abolitionist. There's a division in the ruling class. So one section of the ruling class is fomenting radicalism. There's a division in the ruling class, and a prophet comes along and tries to stop slavery. He gets killed for it. And why are there so many soldiers there? They sent practically the entire army out to surround John Brown when he was being hanged, because they were convinced there was a plot to rescue him. There were all kinds of rumors about Henry David Thoreau and Emerson, and they were going to all, come down and free him. So they had to send like the whole army out practically to surround the gallows, to make sure that nobody came along to free John Brown. Because among the people, among the small farmers, among the industrialists of the North, among the labor unions, the bulk of the population of America was against slavery. However, in the South, the slaveholders had a monopoly on political power. Unbelievable. But that's John Brown, the last moments of John Brown's life. A very good dude, absolutely. Before he's executed for treason for leading an uprising against slavery. There's a beautiful painting of John Brown that I believe was painted by a communist, and it's in the state capitol building in the state of Kansas. Right? It's a beautiful painting, and I'm gonna put it on the screen here. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful painting. It is one of my favorite works of art, of a great American revolutionary. Just a great American revolutionary. Look at this. Right? There he is, right? There's John Brown. Right? He's got the Bible with Alpha and Omega, the first and last. It's got an Alpha and an Omega on the pages there. He's got the Bible that says that, it's the first and last, right? Referring to the book of Revelations, where he says, I am the first and the last. The last shall be first, the first shall be last, right? He's got a gun in his other hand representing armed struggle, right? And he's predicting civil war. This was our Jeremiah, basically. America had this horrendous practice of slavery that was hurting our country. It was hurting the population. It was genocidal. Black people were being worked to death. You read about Angola, Louisiana was basically a death camp. It was Auschwitz, right? Where they would just, if you were a rebellious slave, they would send you to Angola, where you would live a maximum of 2 years. You would die of exhaustion, within 2 years. I mean, it was crimes against humanity on a massive scale, right? I mean, they've done a lot to cover up how horrendous slavery was, but read about Angola. Angola was Auschwitz. We had an Auschwitz right here in America. It was called Angola concentration camp, basically. There's a federal prison there now. But in Angola, Louisiana, I mean, it was like they just worked people to death, right? And there you go, right? Those who make peaceful revolution impossible make a violent revolution inevitable. And John Brown came along and said, we have to repent. We have to stop this. And he tried to organize an uprising, and he ended up getting the death penalty. However, we know what happened next. We know that the faction in the ruling class that was against slavery, they found another rabble-rouser. All right? They couldn't get an ordinary politician to do it. All right? They couldn't get an ordinary politician to do it. So they found a guy who was well over 6 feet tall, who lived in rural Illinois, which was the Wild West back in those days, a small town lawyer who was known for sticking up for the little guy. They found this guy, Abraham Lincoln, a small town lawyer who had a reputation for sticking up for the little guy, was known for, fighting corporations in court. Abraham Lincoln. And he was very tall, and he could speak with a very loud voice that could be heard over crowds of people. They found this guy, Abraham Lincoln, and I'll show you some of the quotes from Abraham Lincoln. All right? Abraham Lincoln was not a communist. This is some of what Abraham Lincoln said. This is before he was ever elected president, he said this. He said, these capitalists generally act harmoniously and in concert to fleece the people. And now that they've gotten into a quarrel with themselves, we are called upon to appropriate the people's money to settle the quarrel. That's a real quote from Abraham Lincoln. The capitalists generally act harmoniously and in concert to fleece the people. That's Abraham Lincoln. What else did Abraham Lincoln say? Here's another quote from Abraham Lincoln. Capital is only the fruit of labor and could never existed if labor had not existed first. Labor is superior to capital and deserves much higher consideration. That's Abraham Lincoln. Capital is only the fruit of labor. Sounds like the labor theory of value. All right, that's almost sounds like Marx. Now, he wasn't a communist. He wasn't a communist. Don't get me wrong. But this is what he said. And he's a populist. He's a champion of the small farmers who are against slavery. And he gets into office. He takes office. And originally, his platform, he doesn't even say he wants to abolish slavery. All right? He said some pretty racist things when he was running for office. They accused him of believing black people are equal to white people. He said, oh, no, I don't believe that. Said some awful racist things. And when he got into office, he said he didn't even want to abolish slavery, that he just wanted to stop playing ball with it. He said he wanted to stop this nonsense where non-slave states had to accommodate and help, return free, slaves who'd run away, and et cetera. He said, no, we're not doing that anymore. He said he wanted to stop the new states that came into the country from being slave states. He said, no, the new states that will come in, not going to be slave states. But he did not try to stop slavery in the South. That was too much. The slaveholders were angry that their grip on power was being challenged. It was a dictatorship, they said. Lincoln was a dictator. Why? Because they couldn't be in charge anymore. This is how they always play it. Whenever the de facto dictators are getting kicked around, they call it a dictatorship. Venezuela was a dictatorship before Hugo Chavez came in, except it was a dictatorship by American corporations. American corporations told Venezuela what to do. The leaders of Venezuela were appointed by America, and so we called it democracy because the de facto dictatorship got what they wanted. All right? Russia, under Boris Yeltsin, was a dictatorship. The 1996 election was stolen by America. The United States rigged the Russian election in 1996 to make sure Boris Yeltsin won. In 1993, the people of Russia voted in a referendum that they were going to, that they wanted to stop austerity. And Boris Yeltsin dissolved the parliament and sent tanks out to crush it. Russia was a dictatorship in the 1990s, but it was a dictatorship of the de facto rulers, the people who worked for the United States. It was a dictatorship by Bill Clinton. It was a dictatorship by Jeffrey Sachs. It was a dictatorship by BP and Shell and Chevron. Russia was absolutely a dictatorship in the 1990s. But they didn't call it dictatorship because they were the dictators. Say hi to Matches, everybody. They were the dictators. But then Vladimir Putin got into office and he restructured the economy of Russia so that the oil and the gas was under the control of the Russian people, not under the control of American banks and corporations. And he started restructuring Russia's economy so that the oil and gas revenue could reboot the economy. And he started changing Russian society so that it wasn't run by America anymore. Boris Yeltsin, a puppet of the United States, was out, and Putin got in, and he restructured and rebuilt Russia's economy. And Wall Street wasn't the dictator of Russia anymore. Washington wasn't the dictator of Russia anymore. Bill Clinton and his puppet Boris Yeltsin were not the dictators of Russia anymore. So now what do they say? It's a dictatorship. This is what they always do. So just like what they do now, when Abraham Lincoln got in and the slaveholders couldn't de facto rule anymore, they called Abraham Lincoln a dictator. He was a dictator, they said. Why? Because they couldn't dictate anymore. That's how it works. If Wall Street and the big corporations and bankers can't dictate, the person who stands up to them must be a dictator because them ruling is just the natural way it's supposed to be. Wall Street rules the world. The British Empire rules the world. Big oil companies rule the world, and they get their way. And if somebody comes along, if a leader comes along who's strong enough to challenge them, it must be dictatorship because they're just naturally supposed to be in charge. That's the way they see things. So don't ever, whenever they start talking about dictators, Biden called Xi Jinping a dictator. You know why? Because in China, Wall Street isn't the dictator anymore. That's why. That's why they think Xi Jinping is a dictator, because they're supposed to be the dictator, and Xi Jinping gets in the way of that. That's how this works. You're a dictator if you block them from being the dictator. That's the way these things work. If you block them from being the dictator, you yourself must be a dictator. And that's the way it was with Abraham Lincoln. The Southern states said Abraham Lincoln was a dictator. And so they seceded from the country. And in order to win the war, Abraham Lincoln had to find more of these agitators. He had to find more of these rabble-rousers. He had to find more Jeremiahs. He had to find more John Browns to stir the people up. So who did he find? He found Frederick Douglass. You know Frederick Douglass? A former slave who'd gotten his freedom and had become an outspoken radical opponent of slavery. Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass went to the White House and met with Abraham Lincoln and became friends with Abraham Lincoln. This guy, Frederick Douglass, this guy was a revolutionary. And Lincoln became good friends with Frederick Douglass. W.E.B. Du Bois says that Lincoln's view of black people changed because of his friendship with Frederick Douglass. There's a story of, Frederick Douglass came to the White House to meet with Abraham Lincoln, famous story. And they didn't know who Frederick Douglass was, I guess. And when they got to the White House, they saw that he was black. And they said, no, black guy can't come into the White House. No, that can't happen. And Frederick Douglass, he had the letter. He said, no, I've got an appointment with the president of the United States. And they said, yeah, but then we didn't know you were a black guy, so you can't come in. No. And so the story is that Abraham Lincoln walked down from the Oval Office to the guards or whoever was blocking Frederick Douglass, and he said, I want to meet with my friend Frederick Douglass. And he had to tell his own staff to shove it up their ass, basically, to cut out their racist crap, and that Frederick Douglass could come meet with him in the Oval Office. That was a big deal. Frederick Douglass had been a former slave who went around the country telling people how horrible slavery was. His book that he had written, The Life of Frederick Douglass, told how horrible slavery was. This guy was a radical. He ruined somebody's 4th of July celebration. You ever hear about that, right? There's a very famous speech. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? They invited him to a 4th of July banquet, and he gave a speech condemning America for hypocrisy, urging the country to repent, and saying that all its talk of freedom and justice was hypocrisy because of the way it was treating black people. He was a radical, a rabble-rouser, a Jeremiah, a prophet. And he met with Abraham Lincoln at the White House. Who else did Abraham Lincoln empower? Who else did Abraham Lincoln have to mobilize in order to defeat slavery? This person. This person became the first woman to lead U.S. soldiers into battle. Abraham Lincoln, not only did he support this woman, Harriet Tubman, he made her a U.S. military commander. He gave her a rank in the U.S. Army, and he gave her and her army of former slaves. He made them an official division of the U.S. Armed Forces. Did you know this? Right? During the war, 700 former slaves in South Carolina, under the command of Harriet Tubman, were dispatched by Abraham Lincoln to go and liberate slave plantations. And they went up and down the banks of the Combahee River in South Carolina, freeing slaves as an official division of the U.S. Army. That happened. You want to talk about heroic revolutionary activity, right? This woman had been a criminal. She had been somebody who went around freeing slaves. She'd carried a gun with her. And if people tried to go back, right? If people tried to go back and say, oh, I'm scared, I want to go back, she would point a gun at them and say, you're coming with us. She was a criminal. She was an armed badass. She had led the Underground Railroad and had been involved in slave uprisings and assassinations. He made her an official leader of the U.S. Armed Forces. She became the first woman to ever lead U.S. soldiers into battle. He gave her military rank. She was, I believe, they called her General Tubman. General Tubman. Newspapers praised her patriotism, sagacity, energy, and ability. You can read about Harriet Tubman. This is who Abraham Lincoln had to team up with because there was a division in the ruling class. Now, who else? I have to mention this. Who else did Abraham Lincoln have to team up with in order to win the war? Who else? Got to mention this guy. This guy, August Willich, this guy became a brigadier general in the U.S. Army. He wasn't born in the United States. He was born in Germany. This guy had been a leader of the Communist League of Karl Marx. This guy was a good friend of Karl Marx. And he and Karl Marx had teamed up in Germany in 1848 to have a communist uprising. And they lost. And so he had to flee Germany. So this guy moved to America, and he had military experience. And he ended up moving up the ranks to become a brigadier general in the Union Army, despite the fact that he was a communist born in Germany. There was a communist general in the Union Army, August Willich, a communist radical who fled his home country and moved to the United States after he lost an armed revolution, was frequently in contact with Karl Marx throughout the war. And he became a brigadier general in the Union Army, August Willich. All right? In addition to that, I'm just showing you the rabble-rousers, the revolutionaries, the Jeremiahs that made up the American fight against slavery. There's this guy. I've talked about this guy on here before, more recently. Horace Greeley. This guy was a radical newspaper man in New York City. He wrote the New York Tribune. He was the editor of the New York Tribune. And he was a feminist. He wanted women to have the right to vote. He was a socialist, and that he advocated socialism and thought socialism was better than capitalism. He was a Christian because he interpreted the Bible as being against slavery and being in line with socialism and women's rights. And he was the editor of a very radical newspaper called the New York Tribune. Horace Greeley. And Horace Greeley's slogan was, "Go West, young man. Go West, young man." And he believed that America was associated with social progress. Go West, young man. Horace Greeley. He was part of the Abraham Lincoln coalition. Horace Greeley. You can read all about Horace Greeley. But in addition, who did Horace Greeley hire to be his London correspondent for the New York Tribune? Who did Horace Greeley hire? Anyone who's watched these streams knows this already. But who was it who wrote the columns for Horace Greeley's newspaper that were about London? Who wrote the news from London? Just like I am the New York City correspondent for RT. When RT is reporting on stuff in New York City, they go to Caleb. When the New York Tribune of the 1860s was reporting on events in London, who was it who did their reporting? Karl Marx. I've got the journalism of Karl Marx, dispatches from the New York Tribune. So Abraham Lincoln, in order to defeat the slaveholders, had to foment a radical movement. He had to foment a radical movement in order to defeat the slaveholders because slavery was tearing the country apart. And this is important history. This is very, very, very important history. But anyhow, I told you that I was also going to talk about the Soviet Union. Right? So first we talked about the prophet Jeremiah. About how there was a division in the ruling class and the ancient kingdom of Israel. You had a lot of the rich people that were using forced labor to build their mansions, and you had a lot of the rich people that were engaging in human sacrifices. And so Jeremiah came along as a rabble-rouser who was saying, we've got to stop doing this or we're going to be conquered by a foreign power. And at first the king Josiah promoted him, but then the new king persecuted him. He was thrown into the into the pillory. He was tortured, and they tried to kill him, and etc. And eventually, what he warned them about happened, and the kingdom of Israel was conquered. Then I told you about John Brown and how John Brown came along, and he said slavery is wrong, and how there was this whole movement against slavery, and John Brown tried to lead an uprising against it, and they gave him the death penalty. And John Brown warned, he said, if we don't repent, if we don't stop, he said, what did he say? I'll put it on the screen one last time. John Brown warned that, that he said, this ominous warning. John Brown said, I, John Brown, am now quite certain that the crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away but with blood. Those were the words of John Brown. And he said, look, you don't listen to me. You don't listen to what I have to say. I'll go off on a tangent here because it's necessary. Do you think John Brown would have had a huge social media page when he said that? I don't think so. No, I don't think so. Do you think Jeremiah going around telling everybody, no, you got to stop living in luxurious mansions. You got to stop having wild sex parties. You got to stop sacrificing your children to make do you think they would have had a huge social media account? No, because people didn't want to hear that. If you want to know if someone's a fake or if someone is real, ask yourself this. Are they telling you what you need to hear, or are they telling you what you want to hear? Frauds, false prophets, con men, demagogues tell you what you want to hear. But prophets, people who speak truth, tell you what you don't want to hear. Jeremiah said, we are going to be conquered if we don't repent from our ways. John Brown said, there's going to be a huge civil war. People that are legit, people that have real truth to tell, don't tell you what you want to hear. They tell you what you need to hear. And social media is all set up to help you hear what you want to hear, right? If you hate Republicans, you can find all kinds of people who hate Republicans and make posts just digging Republicans and hating Republicans. If you hate Democrats, you can find all kinds of posts and social media things to reinforce what you think, to tell you what you already believe in a super emotional way, to get you worked up about what you already think, to reinforce beliefs that you already have. That's what social media is very good at. It's good at telling you what you want to hear. But that's not what a prophet does. And that's not what a real agitator and radical does. A real agitator and radical tells you what you need to hear. It doesn't reinforce what you already think. It gets you to think new thoughts. It doesn't tell you what you already believe. It gets you to challenge your beliefs. Jeremiah didn't come along in ancient Israel and say, oh, you know what you all are doing? That's great. No. Go and read the book of Jeremiah. I challenge you. That is my challenge. Go read the book of Jeremiah in the Bible. You can tell that what Jeremiah was telling the people of ancient Israel was not what they wanted to hear. He said, you all are going to hell, and our country is going to be colonized, and they're going to tear down the temple, and they're going to force us into foreign lands, and they're going to make our women into sex slaves, and they're going to kill our children, and they're going to do awful things if we don't repent from our ways. It was not a popular message, but it's what people needed to hear. John Brown was not telling people what they wanted to hear. He wasn't reinforcing their beliefs. John Brown was telling people what they needed to hear. And a genuine revolutionary tells people what they need to hear and not what they want to hear. And the problem with social media is that social media is designed to just reinforce whatever you already believe and not challenge you. And that is a problem I have with social media. But now we will move on to the next point. To the next point. Because I've got a lot still to talk about. Stalin. Joseph Stalin. You know Stalin, leader of the Soviet Union. Well, a lot of people don't know that Stalin was a poet. When Stalin was a young man, his hobby was writing poetry, believe it or not. And this poem was written by Joseph Stalin. It's a beautiful poem. And just so you know, the panduri, that refers to a musical instrument. It's kind of like a lute. He walked from a house to house, knocking at the strangers' doors with his old oak panduri and with his simple song. And in his song, like pure sunshine, there was great truth, a lofty dream. He could make hearts turned into stones to beat again. He woke up many people's minds who were sleeping in a deep darkness. But in spite of the glorious greatness, people of his land gave to the outcast poison in a cup. They told him, God damned, drink till the end. And your song is alien for us, and we don't need your truth. Stalin wrote those words when he was a young man. He was like 19 years old when he wrote that. What is Stalin talking about in this poem? He walked from a house to house, knocking at the strangers' doors with his old oak panduri and with his simple song. And in his song, like pure sunshine, there was a great truth, a lofty dream. He could make hearts turned into stone beat again. He woke up many people's minds who were sleeping in deep darkness. But in spite of the glorious greatness, people of his land gave to the outcast poison in a cup. They told him, God damned, drink till the end. And your song is alien for us. And we don't need your truth. It's a beautiful, beautiful poem. I'm sure if you read it in the original Georgian, I'm sure it's even more beautiful. We'll put up a picture of the young man who wrote it. This is the poetry of the young Stalin, right? Before he had the handlebar mustache. This is what Stalin looked like. Here, let me find a picture I can put on the screen. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay, there we go. Here. Just had to find a picture of him to put on the screen. This is young Stalin. This is the young man who wrote that beautiful, beautiful poem. All right, that's what he looked like. As a young man, and he's writing a poem about a guy who goes from door to door playing songs and how the people don't appreciate the songs because they point to truths that the people don't want to hear. Very powerful poem that young Stalin wrote, but it's about this frustration. When you come along and you tell people things they don't want to hear rather than things that they do want to hear. When you go challenging people, how you face persecution. That's what he's writing about. But how those who come along and say what people need to hear rather than what they want to hear, they face persecution. He's writing about it. And in fact, Stalin went to seminary school. All right, Stalin had studied to become a Russian Orthodox priest. And you can bet, right? You can be absolutely sure. Let me put it on the screen here. That these lines in this poem, this young man had gone to seminary school, gave to the outcast poison in a cup, and they told him, "Goddamn, drink to the end." You can be sure that that is a reference to two different events. That is a reference to the Garden of Gethsemane. The Garden of Gethsemane, what happened? Jesus Christ knew that he was going to be crucified. And so what did he pray to God? He said, "Take the cup away." Right? "Let this cup pass from me." All right, let me find you the scripture. He said, "Oh, my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thy willed." That's a reference to the Bible. That is a reference to Gethsemane. It's a reference to Gethsemane, right? They gave the outcast poison in a cup. Take this cup away. But, and this is where it gets interesting, it may also be a reference to this. All right, there's a very, very famous painting. Very, very famous painting by David, a leader of the French Revolution. But this happened long before Christ, long before Jesus. How did they kill Socrates? They gave him a cup of poison, a cup of hemlock, and they made him drink it. So when Jesus says, "Take this cup away," it's very possible that Jesus Christ was referencing what had happened to Socrates. It's very likely, right? In the ancient world, people knew about Socrates. So whether or not Jesus was referring to this, you can be sure that Stalin is referencing in the Bible where Jesus says, "Take the cup away." And perhaps he's also referencing the poison cup that Socrates was forced to drink. Socrates was an ancient philosopher who was given the death penalty, forced to drink hemlock. Right? That's the death of Socrates, the painting by David. But regardless, that's what Stalin is talking about. He's talking about the hardship of being a revolutionary, about how being a revolutionary doesn't make you popular. Being a revolutionary is a difficult thing because people don't want to hear the truth. It's a difficult thing. But I've told people that being a revolutionary is a lot like being a dentist. Nobody wants to go to the dentist. Right? Most of us would prefer. I used to always vomit when I would go to the dentist when I was a kid. Nobody wants to go to the dentist. It's an unpleasant experience. But you get that cavity that hurts so bad, you just have no choice. You'll do anything to not go to the dentist, but you get to the point where that cavity, it just hurts so bad, you have to go to the dentist. That's how most people are with communism and revolution. Most people have no interest in being communists or revolutionaries. And you even get a layer of people who think they have an interest in being a communist or revolutionary. They like the fantasy of it. They fantasize they're going to be some action hero, or they like the idea of social justice. But the idea of actually joining an organization, actually sacrificing for a cause, actually living a disciplined life to carry out the goals of the revolution. No. They don't want to do that. They're out of there. Well, the crisis intensifies. Conditions in society get worse and worse. Divisions in the ruling class become more and more intense. And that cavity hurts so bad, you have to go find the dentist. The crisis gets to the point that even though the masses of people don't want to turn to revolutionary ideology, even though they just want to live their lives and raise their kids, the crisis becomes so intense that they have no choice but to go and follow the revolutionary. A revolutionary crisis is a situation where politics becomes unescapable, where the masses of people are all faced with a choice. The people who never think about politics, people who never would engage with these ideas, things in their society become so intense that they're unescapable. That is the moment when people become revolutionaries. People become revolutionaries because the crisis becomes so intense, they cannot escape it. And that's what happened. World War I, the crisis in Russian society became so intense that the Bolsheviks came to power. But this I want to show you because, again, we're talking here, this stream is very interesting. We're talking about a lot of different history, but, the Bolsheviks, as I've pointed out many times, the leaders of the Bolsheviks were rich kids. The leaders of the Bolsheviks were intellectuals, children of the rich, children of the middle class. Very, very liberal folks. And when the Bolsheviks first came to power, they were very anti-religious, and they were very much into sexual freedom. Lenin disagreed. This is a quote from Lenin. This is a quote from Lenin that would probably make a lot of liberals angry. I can just find the right quotation from Lenin. Where did I put it? Okay, hold on. Here, I think I've got it in my phone. Hold on. Here we go. After the Russian Revolution, the old society had been overthrown. The Tsar had been executed. The Russian Orthodox Church had been outlawed and persecuted. And the Bolsheviks, they were all about sexual freedom. They were all about sexual freedom. And Vladimir Lenin He wasn't so into that. And this is an actual quote from Vladimir Lenin. The revolution demands concentration, increase of forces from the masses, from individuals. It cannot tolerate orgiastic conditions, such as are the norm for decadent heroes and heroines of Dionysio. Dissoluteness in sexual life is bourgeois and is a phenomenon of decay. The proletariat is a rising class. It does not need the intoxication as a narcotic or a stimulus. Intoxication as little by sexual exaggeration as by alcohol. It must not and shall not forget the shame, the filth, and the savagery of capitalism. It receives the strongest urge to fight from a class situation, from the communist ideal. It needs clarity, and again clarity. And so I repeat, no weakening, no waste, no self-destruction of forces, self-control. Self-discipline is not slavery, not even in love. And this is quoted to Clara Zetkin. Clara Zetkin is a leader of German communists. She has a long conversation with Vladimir Lenin about his view of sex. And in the middle of that conversation, Vladimir Lenin goes on a rant against the promiscuity and the sex obsession of the Bolshevik leaders. He says, you can't live this way. He says, self-control, self-discipline is not slavery, not even in love. Dissoluteness in sexual life is bourgeois and is a phenomenon of decay. The proletariat is a rising class. It must not forget and shall not forget the shame, the filth, and the savagery of capitalism. It receives the strongest urge to fight from a class situation, from the communist ideal. It needs clarity, and again, clarity. So I repeat, no weakening, no waste, no destruction of forces. This is Lenin ranting against sexual promiscuity. And, in the middle of this conversation, you can read Clara Zetkin. It's a long conversation she had with Lenin, and she publishes the notes. She says Lenin goes on a long rant about people, this glass of water theory. At the time, a lot of the Bolsheviks were saying that sex should be as meaningless as drinking a glass of water. Anyone can have sex with anybody or whatever. And Lenin's like, no, we're not into that. No, we're not. No, we're not. Discipline, self-control. That's what we need if we're going to have a strong socialist society. That's what Lenin had to say about that. Very interesting. And we know that, and I've talked many times. I've talked many times about how the strength of Stalin was that he took Marxist, Leninist ideas and he connected them with the Russian culture. The Russian people are, even now, but historically especially, we're very conservative. And the radical liberalism and individualism of the Bolsheviks wasn't going to fly with them. And that the reason that Stalin ascended into the leadership of the Soviet Party was because Stalin was the mass organizer. Stalin was from a rural village in Georgia. He was Country Joe. He'd been to seminary school. He could read and write. But Stalin was the editor of the Pravda, which was the daily Bolshevik newspaper, the agitational newspaper that was read by thousands of people. Stalin was from the people. Whereas the leadership, the bulk of the leadership of the Bolshevik Party, Lenin, Bukharin, Zinoviev, Trotsky, they were from the wealthy classes. And their radical liberal ideas, their middle-class radical liberal ideas, and the deeply conservative beliefs of the Russian peasantry and the Russian working class were at odds with each other. And if you read this great book, Stalin on the Opposition, you will see Stalin explaining over and over again to the Bolshevik leaders how to work with the masses of people. He understood the masses of people, and Trotsky did not. He had a deep connection with the masses of people, and many of the rich Bolshevik middle-class radicals did not have this connection. You read some of these pieces where this book is just all of Stalin's speeches about Trotsky and where they disagreed, and it's very, very well put together, right? He's talking about the trade unions. It says he's talking about how you can't use military methods among the people. Trotsky's position is that they'll just draft everybody into the army, and that people's military service will be working in a factory. And Stalin says, a group of party workers headed by Trotsky, intoxicated by the successes achieved by military methods in the army, supposes that those methods can and must be adopted among the workers in the trade unions and in order to achieve similar successes in strengthening the unions and reviving industry. But this group forgets that the army and the working class are two different spheres, and that a method that is suitable for the army may prove unsuitable and harmful for the working class and its trade unions. It says the army is not a homogeneous mass. It consists of two main social groups, workers and peasants. He says, but in contrast, the working class is homogeneous. Its economic position disposes it towards socialism. It is easily influenced by communist agitation. It voluntarily organizes in trade unions, and as a consequence of all of this, it constitutes the foundation, the salt of the earth of the Soviet state. It is not surprising, therefore, that the practical work of our industrial unions has been based primarily on methods of persuasion. And this explains the rise of such purely trade union methods as an explanation, mass propaganda, encouragement of initiative, and independent activity among the mass of workers, the election of officials, and so forth. The salt of the earth. He's quoting the Sermon on the Mount. The salt of the earth. That's what he refers to the Russian working class as, the salt of the earth. But anyhow, what does all of this have to do with our time now? Right? It's almost 2 hours I've been talking on here about history. What does all of this have to do with our time now? Well, America's fallen apart. In case you didn't notice, America's fallen apart. Our roads are falling apart. Our bridges are falling apart. Our water treatment facilities are falling apart. Our power plants are falling apart. Our schools are falling apart. Our universities are falling apart. Our cities are falling apart. It was just in San Francisco. Our country is falling apart. Our country is falling apart. And there is one school of people among the so-called left who think that the best way to be a communist and the best thing to do is to go, that's great. America's a big racist settler country and it should fall apart. Well, that's really nice of them to say. I guess I can't stop them from saying that. They have the right to say that. But I don't think people realize what the collapse of a society really means. As much as I am mad at the American government and mad about injustice, I really like the electricity working when I turn the light switch. I really like water coming out of the faucet when I go into the bathroom. I really like going to the grocery store and buying food and being able to eat it. And when a society collapses, those things do not happen, okay? It's beyond me, these people who think, oh, we can talk about the collapse of America. And it's like, what does that mean, okay? What does the collapse of America really mean? You think it means what? What? We're not racist anymore? We're not sexist anymore? No, the collapse of a civilization. The collapse of a country. Anyone who lived through the fall of the Soviet Union, people who lived through the fall of Bulgaria, people who've lived through societies that are torn apart by civil war and instability. It is not a matter of everyone not being racist and sexist anymore. It's not a matter of trans rights suddenly being tolerated. It's a matter of electricity don't work no more. It's a matter of not having food. It's a matter of not having running water. It's some Mad Max shit, as Bestworth is saying. It's not fun. It is not fun. The collapse of a civilization is not a fun thing to live through. The fall of the Roman Empire. Rome was awful. But the fall of the Roman Empire, it led to humans on average becoming a couple inches shorter because nutrition and calorie intake went down. It led to the human life expectancy going down by like a decade. Right? A society can be evil. A society can be deeply flawed. But if it collapses, there's no guarantee. It's not like automatic. And that's what I think these people don't seem to realize. They have it in their mind that like America collapses and then we just like automatically become socialist. No, that is not how these things work. That is not how these things work, right? The society collapses. And then we become a socialist paradise. No. That is not how it works. That is not how it works. Did the Roman Empire fell and then it became a socialist paradise? No. Right? No. Society's collapsing generally leads to mass instability, hunger, a decrease in living standards, chaos, violence, a lot of people dying, a rise in criminal organizations, a rise in human trafficking, a rise in armed gang. No. The fall of a civilization is not a good thing. And if you want to be self-righteous and fantasize that it's a good thing, don't even think about organizing the masses of people. Because you can think that the fall of a civilization is a great thing. It's just some great thing, right? It's America will learn, and you can think that. I'm not going to stop you from thinking that. But in the real world, the fall of a civilization is a very, very bad thing. And as socialists, our job is not to go around celebrating the fall of America. Our job is to go around explaining that America must repent and change its ways and restructure itself to be in line with the part of the world that's rising. We need to not represent the road to chaos. We need to represent the way out. 1936, 1932, Communist Party USA, their presidential campaign slogan was the revolutionary way out of the crisis. Not the revolutionary way to the crisis, the revolutionary way out of the crisis. Communist Party USA in 1940, their presidential campaign was called The Way Out. Our job is not to advocate a crisis. Our job is that when the crisis comes, we have the way forward. We have the way to solve the crisis. Our job isn't to create the crisis. Our job is to solve the crisis. Capitalism is creating the crisis. Capitalism is unpaving the roads. Capitalism is spending all our money on drones and bombs for Israel while children go hungry in this country. Capitalism is allowing the heartland to rot. Capitalism is collapsing all by itself. Our job is to solve problems, not to create problems. Socialism and moving the United States toward a rationally planned economy is a way to solve the crisis, to liquidate the crisis. And we have put forward a 4-point plan about how to solve the crisis. 1, mass mobilization to rebuild the country. 2, public ownership of oil, natural gas, coal, timber, all of our natural resources. 3, public control of our banking system, the creation of a national bank and state and local banks, and assigning credit strategically in the interest of growth for the entire country. 4, an economic bill of rights, the right to jobs, housing, education. With those 4 steps, we could rejuvenate America. And America's economy would be much like the economy of the BRICS countries. It would be rising. We have to be city builders. We have to be city builders. We have to be city builders because we are city builders. And you're on the list. And any more super chats, by all means, please. I see Jamie Turner has a Rumble rant. What's going on? Anyway, we're city builders. We are building an organization, and our organization does not aim to destroy America. Our organization aims to save America. But in order to save America, we're going to have to say unpopular things. We're going to have to point to truths that people do not hear. We're going to have to endure persecution. We're going to have to make sacrifices. We're going to have to be unpopular. We're going to have to say things that need to be said. And we're going to have to change the way the socialist movement operates. And that's what our whole thing about synthetic left is. We have to be builders. And we have to build a movement that isn't based on resentment, a movement that isn't based on jealousy, a movement that isn't based on libidinal release and the desire to get your anger out. We're going to have to cultivate a patriotic, constructive, optimistic socialism. That is the only way forward. And as we advocate the United States getting stronger, and as we advocate the United States rebuilding itself with socialism, and as we advocate friendship with Russia and China and Korea and Venezuela and Cuba, as we advocate that, we have to build a block of society, a group of people, a network that can stay together and withstand the hell and high water that comes as the crisis intensifies. That is our task. We must hold together a network of people who may disagree with each other, who may have different ideas, different perspectives, but can stay together, can be bonded together to withstand persecution, to withstand attacks, to withstand disagreements that may come up, and can work together as the crisis intensifies, and can be prepared to go to the masses with a solution to improve the country. That is the role that we must play. That is the task that we must take on for ourselves. We must build an organization, a group of people who can work together, who can put our egos aside, who can make sacrifices, who can learn to be patient with each other, and can take care of each other. And let me emphasize, take care of each other. Can care for one another. Can have love in their hearts. We have to build an organization. We have to build a network of anti-imperialists who can see a prosperous America beyond imperialism. That's what we must do. That's what we must do. And I believe that this is what the genuine communists around the world want. This is what Xi Jinping said in San Francisco.
And never interferes in its internal affairs. China has no intention to challenge the United States or to unseat it. Instead, we will be glad to see a confident, open, ever-growing, and prosperous United States.
Do you see that? We will be glad to see a confident, ever-growing, and prosperous United States. Confident, meaning we know our history, we know who we are, we're proud of who we are. Open, meaning we have nothing to hide, that we're not retreating from the world, we're not building walls. Ever growing, meaning that there is no limit to growth, meaning that our children have a better living standard than we have, meaning that more schools and more hospitals and more power plants and more jobs are created, not degrowing, ever growing. Prosperous United States. That is what Xi Jinping says he wants for America, and that is what we want for America also. A confident, open, ever-growing, and prosperous United States. That is what we advocate. Not revolutionary chaos and instability, not burn it down, tear it down. We advocate a confident, open, ever-growing, prosperous United States. A country where we don't have homelessness and drug addiction. A country where we don't have children who are food insecure. A country where our educational system is making kids smarter. A country where we don't have student debt destroying the lives of the next generation. A country where people don't lose their homes because they go to the doctor. A confident, open, ever-growing, and prosperous United States. That is what we advocate. That is what we want too. But we know the only way that America can become that is to break free from imperialism. Kick Wall Street out of America. Trader Street. Wall Street out of America. Kick London out of America. Seize control of our natural resources. Seize control of our banks. Organize the economy to serve public good and not the profits of a wealthy few. A new America with a government of action that fights for working families. That is the road to a prosperous, confident, ever-growing America. That is the road. That is what we want. And that is what genuine communists want. And that is what we want. And we at CPI are the only people that have the common sense to understand that's what it means to be a socialist. To be a socialist in America means that you love America more than anybody. We are the most patriotic people that ever existed in this country. We love America enough to say, you gotta change, brother. We love America to say, you got a problem. We love America to say, you gotta change. You gotta change or you're going to hell. That's real love. That is real friendship. That is real patriotism. We love our people enough that we can say that this system that spends so much on war, that is grinding itself into poverty, this has got to change. We love America to say Wall Street needs to go. We love America enough to say the Pentagon has got to go. We love America to say we can do better than this. We can do better than this. That's how much we love America. We love America like Jeremiah loved Israel. Enough to say things that would make him unpopular that the people of Israel needed to hear. We love America like John Brown loved America. We love America like Stalin loved the people of Russia. Enough to tell them the unpopular truths, enough to face the rejection that comes with telling people things they don't want to hear. We love this country enough to tell it what it desperately needs to hear. That is how much we love America. All these phony politicians who get up there with their smiley faces. God bless America. Oh boy, I love this country so much. That's why I'm sending all our money to Israel. Oh boy, gee golly, I love America. Shut the fuck up. You don't love America. If you loved America, you'd stop selling her down the river. We love America enough to say that imperialism is bad for America. Capitalism and the rule of profits is bad for America. We love America enough to say that if we want to have a future as a country, we got to get along with Russia. We love America to say that if we want to have a future as a country, we've got to get along with China. We love America enough to say that if we want to have a future as a country, we got to get along with Iran and with Venezuela and with Cuba. We love America enough to say that Israel is not our friend. Britain and the British Empire is not our friend. We love America enough to say that the moneybags who own our politicians are the biggest traitors we've ever had. And they're selling our country down the river to serve an international financial oligarchy. That is how much we love America. We love America to look America in the face and say, repent. Change your ways. We love America more than anybody loves America. And that's why we'll win. Because when shit hits the fan, you find out who really loves you and who was just playing. You know who your friends are when you're in trouble. When you're in trouble, you find out who your real friends are. And America is going to face a moment of reckoning where it's going to find out that its friends are not in the Republican Party or in the Democratic Party. It's going to find out that its friends are in the working class. And it's the working people who really love this country because they live in this country. They breathe the air. They drive the roads. They feed the kids. They teach in the schools. They construct and they build. And they are the only future that this country has. The working families, the working class, is the only future that America can ever have. And it is with the working class that America can be free. And it is with the working class that America can be prosperous and be reborn and rebuilt as part of the new economy that is emerging. We love America. We are America. And our country is under the grip of imperialism. It's under the grip of an international financial oligarchy. It is under the grip of multinational corporations and banks that have no loyalty to anything but their profits. They worship idols of gold and idols of silver. And the crisis is coming. And that moment will arise. That moment will arise. When our solutions will make sense. And our road forward will be the only road forward. And our ability to create a network of people who trust each other and can swing into action, our ability to do that will determine how effective we are when that moment arises. That is what I have taken 2 hours and 16 minutes to explain to you all. And I used a lot of historical analogies, and I used a lot of examples, and I helped you all to understand what it is you need to understand. And that is why what's coming up December 2nd is so gosh darn important. I get on here and I tell you all about my conference. Y'all probably think, there he goes again, talking about that big conference he's doing. Yeah, big deal. You know, he's got Scott Ritter coming out. Okay, it's probably going to be a great event. No. You don't get it. You do not get it. Time is running out. It is urgent. It is absolutely urgent that we build a real organization with real political infrastructure. It is really urgent that we start recruiting people who would never go looking for this kind of message, never in a million years dream of looking into what socialists and Stalin admirers have to say. You're on the list. And start building a real organization with real roots and communities dedicated to what we're really about. It's urgent. It is absolutely urgent. And this conference we are doing, there's already so many people I don't know registered for it. And that is awesome. I think I've shown you the pictures. We are going door to door in Portland. Door knockers are going on doors. Posters are going up in neighborhoods. Outreach is happening. We are doing it. We are building an organization, the kind of organization that can actually get this done. We're having a big event in Portland on December 2nd. And we need you there. We need you there to support us. We need you to help promote the event. We need you there. And on top of that, we need money. And I know that's a predictable thing to say, and I know you're probably rolling your eyes, but I'm telling you, we need money. It's all paid for at this point, but it's a really tight squeeze. We got people coming in from California. I'm trying to figure out how to rent them a van or a vehicle so they can come in from California. We've got a second cameraman to record it so that we have a high quality video of the event. We're trying to figure out how we can borrow some money or somebody can put up the funds to make sure that this second cameraman can come in and film it, right? He needs to be compensated for his work, and he needs his plane tickets to be covered. We've got members of our organization from different parts of the country who are essential to the work that we do, but we need to bring them into town. And yes, the whole thing is paid for at this point. The conference is going to happen. It is happening, no matter what. It is going to happen. But it's a tight squeeze. It's a tight squeeze right now. And if you want to make a difference, help support the conference, right? We have gotten some very big contributions from our very good friends, and that's great, but it's still a tight squeeze. I mean, we have not raised anywhere near the amount that we wanted to raise for this conference. I'll just be real with you all. We have raised a lot, and it's helped, and we've got enough that we're doing the conference, but it's a tight squeeze. It's a tight squeeze right now. So anything that people can do would be great. And you know what? I will make the same request that I made the other night. If you're watching this right now and you can afford to drop $5 on the Give, Send, Go, do it. Right? Do it. You will make Elizabeth, our president, you will make her life a lot easier. And let me just so people are clear, I don't have access to this. Elizabeth runs all of this, right? I don't handle CPI funds. I am so bad at, budgeting and all of that. I don't handle CPI funds at this point, right? So Elizabeth, that's all on her end. I can't log into the Give, Send, Go. That's one way you can support us. If you don't want to give on Give, Send, Go, you can give an anonymous donation on Give, Send, Go. We'll have no idea where it came from if you want. I mean, you can obviously put where it came from. You can do that. Or if you would like, right? There's another way you can give. Stripe, right? You can go to the CPI website. We have a donate button, and that'll take you to the Stripe account. You can give via Stripe also. I don't have access to this either, right? Right? I don't. Part of what when we reformed as an organization, part of the new way of operating was that I don't have direct access to any funds, right? I let Elizabeth, our president, handle that, and I sleep a lot easier. She doesn't sleep as easy because she's, our president, and, she has to handle the funds, but she handles these things, and this is much better, right? So if you want to help us do this conference, if you can afford to drop $5 in there, just $5, $5 on the Give, Send, Go, you can write us a nice little note, or you can be anonymous, or whatever you want to do, or you can send it via Stripe. That would really make a difference. Would really, really help us to do our work effectively. I would really, really appreciate it if you could do that. If everyone watching right now who can afford to drop $5, just $5 to help us do our conference, that would be great. That would be great. There's 130 people watching right now. If all of you dropped $5, we would be set. Like, we could do the conference and then some, So do it, Great. Drop us $5. Just drop us $5. It would really make our lives easier if you dropped us $5 right now. But that's my request. If you can do that, yeah, that's kind of where we're at. I do want to let you all know, before we go to our roll call and before I start answering people's questions, because I see there's a lot of questions that have come in. Well, it's good. I got plenty to talk about. There's a couple one Rumble rant. There doesn't seem to be any Rockfin tips. No Rockfin tips, but there's a Rumble rant, and then there's 7 super chats I've got to answer. All of them are going to be answered. But anything you can do to help us do this conference would make our lives easier. Our president, Elizabeth Young, president of the Center for Political Innovation, she is not in this country right now. She is representing us at an international gathering. And I will show you pictures. She's doing a great job. She is in Athens, Greece right now at the World Anti-Imperialist Platform at their international conference. She is representing us. She's there with Jyoti Brar from the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist. She's there with Chris Aluli of the Party of Communists. She's there with a variety of different anti-imperialist forces, and I will show you the picture. Hold on. She gave a great speech that we will have video of very soon. It will be great. She gave a great speech, which I got to look at some of the text of ahead of time. And yeah, she gave a great speech to the World Anti-Imperialist Platform Gathering. I will put on the screen that speech, that image. It was really, really great. Really, really tremendous. We are really, really happy. Really, really happy that Elizabeth Young is representing us. We're very happy about that. Here she is. Here she is speaking at the World Anti-Imperialist Platform Gathering in Greece. Really, really tremendous. We are so happy that she is there doing that important work and representing us. We have a closer shot. That's kind of a wider shot with the logos, etc. But we have another image of her doing that. It's really, really great. Really, really tremendous. Really awesome. We're really proud of the work that Elizabeth is doing. So that's Elizabeth Young speaking at the World Anti-Imperialist Platform Gathering. We are honored that she is there. So after we do the roll call, I will show you a video of another CPI member giving a speech that happened recently. That's also very important. But why don't we do the roll call? Names and locations, names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations, names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations, names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations, names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Gabby is with us. Utica, Mark Jones in Utica, New York. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. Carl, fascinating, innovative explanation of Jeremiah. There you go. Carl in Washington. John McCarthy in Chicago. Chester in England. Nate in Chicago. Steve in Boston. Mariah says much love in North Carolina. Ryan in Michigan. Jeff in Delaware. Patch in Arizona. Neil Frazier in Hong Kong. Jamie in St. Paul. Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati. Gabby in Chicago. Balthazar in Oakland. Panos in Greece. Carolyn and Dario from Brooklyn. Seasoned Noob in China. Kiwi Dave, New Zealand. Patrick in Maine. Northern Michigan. A Better America. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Names and locations. Names and locations, folks. We will call you all out as we see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and location. Louisville and Louisville, Kentucky. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Anyone on the Auckland, New Zealand, Kiwi Corner is with us. Anyone on the Rockfin? Names and locations. Names and locations. Anthony in Detroit is with us. Moonlight Beach, Scott S. Riverside County, Stephen Morris. Welcome, 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 everybody. So glad to have you all here with us tonight. Very, very good. Very, very good. So now, this is another speech. We support the Uhuru movement. We are big supporters of the Uhuru movement. And that's why it was a real honor that a member of our organization, John McCarthy, was invited to give a speech at the annual Black People's March. The Uhuru movement have been indicted by the FBI. They are facing, prosecution, allegedly being Russian agents. And we have done everything we can to raise awareness about their case and to support them. And we were honored, very, very honored. We've been thanked directly, but we were very honored to be included in their national march. And our member, John McCarthy, gave this speech at the Uhuru rally that happened in Washington, D.C.
On behalf of CPI and Caleb Boppin, and we're honored to have been invited to participate because we understand that the fight to defend the Uhuru 3 is the most important fight going on in this country right now. And apparently some of our fair weather friends don't agree with that. They don't like what the government's doing to you, right? They're against it, right? But they don't see the urgency. And quite frankly, the reason why they don't see the urgency is because they have nothing to worry about, because actually they're not doing or saying anything that's going to get them in any kind of real trouble. Right? Their revolution has permits for the next 10, 15 years. Right? But we at the Center Political for Innovation, we understand the urgency because we understand that this case is not about free speech in the sense of, voicing your opinions or airing your grievances. This is about, they're trying to stop telling people the truth that they need in order to replace this system. And, just like the African People's Socialist Party, you're separating from colonialism by creating, contending in dual institutions of power with your businesses and your clinics and your training programs. At the same time, countries all over the world are separating themselves from this dying system of imperialism. They're dumping the dollar, they're banding together, they're taking control of their own resources, they're building something, right? And the people don't just have a right to know about that. They need to know it, right? But the occupants of that building over there, they need for the people not to know about that. They can't have people knowing that a better way to this dying system is not only possible, but that it is coming into existence and that it is growing, right, and getting stronger every day. So that's why they came after you to sign the suit, and that's why we at CPI are very grateful that you are standing up and fighting back and winning, because by doing that, you are allowing us to stand up and fight back and win. Yes, and win. And we're grateful to you for that, and we promise you we're not going to waste that gift that you have given us. We're going to use that gift to give the people the truth they need to build what has to be built, and so we all don't die with this dying system. Uhuru.
All right. That was great words from John McCarthy. He represented us well. Can you talk about the postal strike of the 1970s? That's interesting. I know there was a postal strike in the 1970s, and I know that there has been a big effort to push privatizations of the post office. And that there has been a big war on the Postal Workers Union. But let's pull it up. The postal strike of the 1970s. Right? The Great Postal Strike of 1970. Right? By 1970, full-time employees, right? Okay. Postal strike of 1970, right? March 18th to March 25th, 1970. The U.S. postal strike was an 8-day strike by federal postal workers in March of 1970. The strike began in New York City and spread to some other cities in the following weeks. This strike against the federal government, regarded as illegal, was the largest wildcat strike in all of U.S. history. President Richard Nixon called out the United States Armed Forces and the National Guard in an attempt to distribute the mail and break the strike. The strike influenced the contents of the Postal Reorganization Act of 1970, which dissolved the United States Postal Department and replaced it with the more corporate United States Postal Service and guaranteed collective bargaining rights for postal workers, though not the right to strike. Wow. 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 I mean, you talk about the year of 1970, everything that happened, right? Kent State happened just a few months later. And there were divisions in the ruling class. There was a spirit of revolt among the population. And this is actually something I didn't know very much about. And, but it shows that, I mean, they did an illegal strike and the militancy led to a victory. The reason that I'm posting, that this question came up, Reestablishment asked about it, because I reported that the postal workers of the United States had just voted to support a ceasefire in Gaza. And I talked about how important that was. And there you go. And that it goes to show you that even though it was an illegal strike, it had an impact. It won them a guarantee of collective bargaining. It certainly had an impact on on the impact of workers. We have postal workers that are members of the Center for Political Innovation. And government employees, those are stable jobs. And that's what, and we'll talk a little bit later, but libertarians have this idea that if you cut government jobs, it leads to economic growth. No, right? Government jobs, like the jobs of postal workers, like the jobs of teachers, they are a subsidy to the economy. And if you get rid of those jobs, then people don't have that money to spend. The jobs of public employees are very, very important. Absolutely, they are important. So there you go. But yeah, the postal workers strike of 1970. Wow. A wildcat illegal strike where Nixon sent the military out to try and deliver the mail. Wild. That is wild. The post office is included in the U.S. Constitution as a state monopoly. The capitalists need a postal service, right? It's in the Constitution. Henry Clay is an excellent example of this. And this is Henry Clay. I think he was referring to a founder of the United States who was opposed to slavery. Henry Clay, right? Former United States Secretary of State, from the Whig Party, right? An advocate of the American system, infrastructure, support of a national bank, helped end the sectional crisis over slavery, leading to the Missouri Compromise. Henry Clay. Right? That's when people talk about American system theory, right? And that's, look, we're influenced by that, right? We are Marxists in our overall view, but, American system theory, which is largely a result of the Schiller Institute, the National Caucus of Labor Committees, there's something to be said for that, right? And I don't think it's right to just completely dismiss it. Now, I maintain and will never abandon the Marxist worldview, but at the same time, the American system is worth studying and understanding it. And if you just dismiss it, if you just write it off, then you're missing out. There were clear divisions in the ruling class when Henry Charles Carey writes about about the English system versus the American system. He's hinting at Lenin's theory of imperialism and how imperialism holds back economic development. That is very, very important to understand. You can't just dismiss these things. Nancy Spanius, former top LaRouche movement, is releasing a new book on this very topic in early December, titled Defeating Slavery, Hamilton's American System Showed the Way. Oh, I didn't realize Nancy Spanius was no longer with the LaRouche movement. I have watched some of her lectures. Nancy Spanius. I am very interested in that. Right? That's interesting. I didn't realize that she was no longer with the LaRouche movement. So that's interesting. That's very, very interesting. Interesting. I Googled her. I see AmericanSystemNow.com. Interesting. So she's separated from the LaRouche movement, I guess. Yeah. Right. Nancy Spanius. Get a copy of Defeating. Okay. I didn't realize she wasn't with the LaRouche people any longer, but that's interesting. That's very interesting. Wow. Well, maybe we can interview her on this channel, I mean, why not, right? So, yeah, I didn't realize. It's interesting. I've watched some of her lectures on the history of the LaRouche movement, and Interesting. Yeah, maybe we can interview her about that. Oh, Henry Clay was a slave owner despite his anti-slavery position, right? Kind of following Washington's example. Yeah, that's what you were getting at. Gotcha. All righty. All right. Corporations are still using U.S. prison labor today, and I was alluding to that in my opening remarks. And like prison labor, it's absolutely unbelievable, right? I mean, it shouldn't be allowed for private for-profit corporations to use prison labor. Now, if you use prisoners to make license plates, you use prisoners to clean up trash along the highway, that's one thing. But prison labor for private corporations should be illegal because it takes jobs away from law-abiding citizens, right? I mean, law-abiding citizens get paid higher wages to do those kind of jobs. It makes it easier for corporations to not pay a decent wage, to use a captive market. Prison labor for private companies needs to be outlawed, period, right? No private company should be able to profit from prison labor. If prisoners are going to do any labor, it needs to be public labor, right? But prison labor for private corporations has to be gotten rid of. That's one thing the Nazis did, you know. The prisoners, they worked in auto plants, they made cars for Volkswagen. Prison labor for private companies must be outlawed. It just must be outlawed. Look, I know federal prisoners are making airplanes, and weaponry for the military industrial complex. They're making underwear for Victoria's Secret. They're answering phone calls. It's a crime, right? They should hire people on the outside and pay them decent wages. They get away with super exploiting prisoners. And that's, so much of the U.S. economy. This is Nazi economics, right? A slave labor underclass. This is criminal, absolutely criminal. And yeah, we've got to outlaw private prison labor. Now, Javier Milei, look, the more I look at that guy, he just looks to me like another Trump, another Bolsonaro, another Boris Johnson. He's got a crazy hairdo. He loves Israel, and he wants to cut government spending. He wants to privatize things, and he acts like a nut, and he waves his arms. He just looks to me like just another one of these new right guys. The fact that he's a libertarian, right? That's a new spin on it, and we'll see. But he's against BRICS, which is, I think, not very good. Yeah. Wouldn't want anyway, I'm sorry. Just had to respond to something there. But anyway, Javier Milei, this guy who just got elected president of Argentina, he calls himself a libertarian. He looks to me like just another new right figure, but the libertarian stuff is a big part of what he's about. I will say this, right? I'm not, he doesn't look good to me. Looks very, very negative in my view. That said, though, at the same time, the way people govern is often very different than they campaign. And that goes for better or for worse. So who knows? Maybe the guy will get in there and one thing will lead to another and he'll end up doing some good stuff. But I don't like much of what he says. It's this idea of you just privatize everything. It'll work. Libertarian magic. That's number one. And then number two, second thing, is that, in addition to that, what was I saying? In addition to that, I don't see, it just looks to me like some new right stuff, but he claims Peronism is socialism. Not exactly. But Juan Perón had a lot of anti-capitalist rhetoric, and he did nationalize a lot of things. And he, it was kind of Bonapartism, but he was friendly to Fidel Castro. He was friendly to the socialist countries. Peronism dabbled in socialism. It never got fully there. It could have turned into socialism under the right circumstances. Argentina was never a socialist country. I never fully had a socialist revolution. But Perón was definitely a Bonapartist. And he was definitely at times very, very solidly in the anti-imperialist camp, but he wavered. Sometimes, he wavered. He went back and forth. Perón was a populist for sure, and he was very much an admirer of Fidel Castro. He was very much an admirer of Che Guevara, but property relations never really changed in Argentina, right? They never fully went to socialism. So, yeah, but look, a lot of the socialists in Argentina call themselves left Peronists. Peronism is a really big part of socialism in Argentina. There's also what they call right Peronists that reject that and that believe in more free market policies. Peronism is Argentine nationalism. There's anti-capitalist elements to it. It's complicated, right? But I don't think Peronism is necessarily socialism, though there are many socialists who consider themselves to be Peronistas, and I've met them. I mean, when I was at the World Festival of Youth and Students in 2013, I remember there was a big mural at the table for Argentina, and it was a picture of Juan Perón and Hugo Chavez. It was like a painting of them holding hands. So I remember I asked them, I said, wasn't Juan Perón a fascist? They said, no, Juan Perón was the greatest, was a true communist in every sense of the word. I thought, really? And that, there are many communists and socialists who see Juan Perón as one of them. The official Communist Party of Argentina does not. And like the hard Marxist-Leninist left of Argentina doesn't. But a lot of the socialist groups that are pro-Cuba, et cetera, the more eclectic Bolivarian groups really do admire Juan Perón. So it's complicated. But no, just simply saying Juan Peronism is socialism. Look, libertarians think everything is socialism. They think the post office is socialism. They think Obamacare is socialism, right? They want and look, I mean, let's see what happens, I mean, this Milei guy, I mean, let's see what he does. All right. Now he's got to do it, right? Prove that privatizing everything is going to make everything correct, right? Show us, right? And, this will be yet another example. And I'm sure that if he fails, if he doesn't create strong socialism, libertarians will just say, well, it wasn't real libertarianism. It's like, it wasn't real libertarianism. Okay. Right. There you go. Just like, whenever China's economic success is, well, that's not really socialism, they say. It's because they're capitalists, right? Even though they have huge state-run industries and all that. Libertarianism is infuriating to me, but there you go. There you go. Similar to Kemal Ataturk. That's a good way of looking at it. I can see that, right? It's kind of nationalism that leans sometimes in a socialist direction, but not completely. I can see that. That's a good analogy. You're kind of right on point there. It's similar to, right? And a lot of Turkish socialists call themselves Kemalists, but the ultra-left in Turkey is very much yeah, exactly. Very good analogy, Nate. Shout out to Nate. Very good way of understanding things. Very, very good way of understanding things. Out of curiosity, have you ever listened to America First by Merrill Haggard, the same person who wrote Okie from Muskogee? Also, your streams are like armor talked about in the book of Ephesians. Well, thank you. I hope that my streams give you the armor of God, a breastplate of righteousness, etc. But there you go. And Okie from Muskogee, I have not heard America First by Merrill Haggard. I should look it up because I like Merrill Haggard's music generally. I probably can't play it on this stream because of the fact that it'll probably hit me with a copyright or something. So, but that's actually a good idea. Good idea. And thank you for pointing that out. I will go listen to that song. So there you go. There you go. I'm very interested in that. Very, very interested. All right. They love us so much that Obama poisoned people in Flint, Michigan. Painful to see the outcome of the poor kids getting sick. I've got a Rumble rant to do also, but let me answer that. Yeah. The Flint water crisis. I mean, wow. I mean, and that's, I mean, you want to talk about a moment for agitation and such. That happened under Obama. It absolutely happened under Obama. So, yeah. And was there justice for it? Did anyone go to prison? I mean, it's, yeah, you want to talk about a criminal thing. A bunch of kids drank lead in their water. Yeah. I mean, look, we have got to build a movement. There's no shortcut. There is no shortcut. We have got to build a movement of the people to stop this nonsense. All right. Well, if anyone has any more super chats, shoot them my way. I do have one more Rumble rant. I saw an old newsreel of Google CEO Eric Schmidt visiting Kim Jong-un in North Korea. Do you know about this? What was happening? I do not know about this, but that's fascinating. Eric Schmidt in North Korea. I wonder what year that was. Eric Schmidt in North Korea. Eric Schmidt goes to North Korea. This was in 2013. Very interesting. Eric Schmidt and former Governor Bill Richardson made a private trip to North Korea, urging humane treatment for a U.S. citizen, imprisoned U.S. citizen. U.S. officials have expressed more concern. State Department says it was poorly timed. Well, that's famous. So apparently, right, this was a thing that used to happen. That was. I'll answer this and then I'll answer the next super chat because that's an important question, and I just have to give you the answer there. So this was a thing that used to happen. Now it's illegal to go to North Korea. If you go to North Korea, they will deactivate your passport and you get a fine of $25,000. Now that's not constitutional. Someone needs to challenge that. They tried to pull that crap with Cuba, and people challenged it. And now they aren't able to kind of pull that crap with Cuba. You're legally allowed to travel. The Supreme Court has said you have the right to travel. However, they're doing something really unconstitutional in North Korea now, and they say you can't go there. Prior to that, it was very common that people would go to North Korea, and they would go to North Korea and they would break the law. There were thousands of Americans who would visit North Korea, and a number of them were spies, and a number of them were committing criminal activities. And they would go there and they would do something, and then they'd be held there. And so then, in order to get them back, Bill Clinton would have to go to North Korea and shake some hands or whatever. Bill Richardson apparently made a big deal out of he called up Obama and said, get me on a plane. And he went to North Korea. And that was kind of a moment of he talks about being a negotiator, and Bill Richardson apparently went to North Korea a couple times to get Americans that were held in North Korea to be free. And after a while, after the death of Otto Warmbier, the USA said, they just outlawed going to North Korea. And that ban is still in effect. And the State Department has outlawed going to North Korea. And it's bullshit. And it's unconstitutional. And somebody needs to challenge it. And the other thing is, look, if you looked at what some of these Americans were arrested for in North Korea, it was ridiculous. All right. One of the guys was a Korean War veteran. And he didn't fight on the North Korean side. He fought on the American side. And he had run kind of an insurgency behind enemy lines in the North Korean section. He was an older man, and he went back to North Korea to meet up with the buddies that he'd run this anti-communist insurgency with during the Korean War. Well, yeah, the North Koreans arrested him, and they said, you can't do that. That would, you know how many millions of people died in the Korean War? This guy was on the other side. The USA is still technically at war with North Korea. He went there as a tourist and then tried to have a meetup with all of his buddies who had fought against the North Korean government during the Korean War. Well, you can't do that. You can't do that. So they arrested him, and he eventually got freed. But, that would be it'd be like the 9/11 hijackers coming to the United States. One of them coming to the United States trying to meet up with other people who worked with them to have a reunion or something. You can't do that, right? If you kill millions of people in a country, you wage war against them, and you're still technically at war. You can't just show up in that country as a tourist and have a meetup. You can't do that. You cannot do that. So, it would every so often somebody would go to North Korea and do something stupid. Otto Warmbier tried to steal a military banner. I'm convinced. Look, I am convinced in a lot of these cases there's more going on than we know about. All right, I am convinced that Otto Warmbier may have been more than a Christian missionary. You know what I'm saying? I am convinced that Otto Warmbier may have, there may have been more going on there. Okay. And a lot of these cases where some American goes to North Korea and does something stupid and gets arrested. And then, first of all, I think if I went to North Korea and did something stupid, I think the American government would probably just be like, yeah, you can have him. You know what I'm saying? I'm just telling you the truth. The fact that Bill Richardson gets on a plane with Eric Schmidt to get some American back, that looks to me like something's going on there. Like the American they grabbed is related to a certain 3-letter agency and is somebody important. And yeah, that's what's going on there. You know what I'm saying? And, this happened a number of times. The North Koreans would catch some American who was doing something stupid in North Korea. It was always interesting. They'd always be doing something stupid. But then Bill Clinton or a former president or somebody would fly to North Korea and shake some hands and have like a photo op with Kim Jong-il. Then the Americans would get sent back. And you have to wonder what was really going on there. I don't think Bill Clinton flies to North Korea to get back just anybody. I think Bill Clinton flies to North Korea to get back people that are important to the American government. And I also think maybe these people the North Koreans arrested were not just arrested for doing something stupid, right? Otto Warmbier tried to steal a banner. That's what we're told. Maybe part of the negotiation of the terms of his release was that he was doing some other stuff and they weren't going to share that. The more you look into these cases, there was something else going on there, right? And the more you look into it, yeah, there's something else going on there. That's all I can say. And again, the old guy who was going to meet up with his old army buddies who had fought against North Korea during the Korean War. It was just a meetup, just a reunion. Is that all that was going on there? Is that why Bill Clinton, I think it was Bill Clinton who flew to North Korea to get him back? I think something else was going on there. A lot of these cases, there's intelligence stuff that's going on, right? And the more you look into this stuff, the more you realize we just don't know. There's a lot that we just don't know, right? The world of intelligence and spies and all of that, we don't know anything about what's going on. And we don't want to know. And we don't know. And that what we actually find out is it's like the tiny tip of the iceberg. I know every so often in American news, they say, some Iranian got arrested or some American got arrested in Iran. And we think we know what's going on there. We don't know what's going on there. Right? Usually there's many, many layers to it. And we have no idea what's going on there. Right? And there's spy versus spy stuff. And we don't know anything about it. Right? And we don't want to know. Right? We are people that we live our lives and, we don't want to know. Right? Right? And also, first of all, and furthermore, if anyone's doing anything like that, stay the hell away from me. Because I'm watched like a hawk, right? I'm an RT reporter. I travel to different countries. I have a YouTube channel where I get on here and talk all day long. So if anyone is doing anything shady, is involved in that, stay the hell away from me because you'll blow your cover because, I'm very, very visible. So, I'm watched like a hawk and, but yeah, there is a whole world beyond our knowledge. There is a whole murky world of spy versus spy stuff that we don't know anything about. And, it's best we don't know about it. You and I are very lucky we know nothing about it, because we don't want to know, right? Otto Warmbier is that all that happened? He was just a Christian missionary who went there and stole a banner? I don't think so, right? There's usually more going on. And the less we know about it, the better, right? Those of us who want to do the kind of anti-imperialist work we do, this public work, we don't want to know anything about that, right? We are doing peaceful anti-imperialist activism. We're very public. We're online and all that. We want nothing to do with, I don't know, 007, scary intelligence shit. We want nothing to do with that. And there is a whole world out there of that kind of shit that goes on, right? And it's there. And it's like, and every so often it makes the news, right? You'll hear, Chinese spy arrested here or, and all this. And then a lot of these times they arrest people who aren't, spies, right? I mean, the crackdown on Chinese Americans, that was outrageous. Number of Chinese American scientists, engineers have had their reputations destroyed just for being Chinese. They weren't spies at all. They were just doing their jobs. They didn't break the rule. They accused them of being spies, and it takes like 2 years for the trial and finally drop everything. And yeah, it's all a big mess. So yeah, Just racism. Exactly. Anyhow, do the super chats go to support the Portland Conference? No, because the Portland Conference is going to happen before I get the super chat money. Super chat money, I won't get that until the 21st of December. The conference is on December 2nd. So, I'm just telling you, Jeebus, nope. The answer is no, because it's just not possible. Google doesn't work that way. The way you get paid for your YouTube super chats is you get paid the next month. So, no. So if you want to donate to the conference, you need to donate to the conference, because the revenue does not go to that, because it won't come in time. It's just not possible unless somehow I could go back in time and change, something, and like give myself money from the future or something. It's just not possible. It's just not possible. So there you go. So, as I said, we do need you to come to our upcoming conference. We'd really love to have you there. So if you're coming, please register. It's going to be a great conference. Let me just talk about it here before I go, right? We just hit the 3-hour mark. That's good. We just hit the 3-hour mark. So let me just talk to you about this conference. All right, we'll just talk about it a little bit before we go. And if anyone else has any more questions, by all means, send a super chat, Rumble Rant, Rockfin Tip. Get me talking. But anyway. So the conference. Scott Ritter, who has done some amazing analysis since October 7th, has played an amazing role. I mean, just really, spitting fire with his analysis of the Israel-Palestine conflict. He's going to be there. Jyoti Brar, leader of the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist, the founder of the World Anti-Imperialist Platform, brilliant speaker, writer. She's going to be there. Craig Pasta Jardula, founder of the Convo Couch, host of the Jimmy Dore Show. He's in Maui doing a documentary about the fires and how corporate greed contributed to that whole crisis. He's going to be there. Great guy. He's going to be there. In addition to that, Peter Coffin, great comedian, filmmaker. He's going to be there. He's going to speak. He's also making a documentary about the whole event. Sayed Husseini, who is an amazing anti-imperialist, an Iranian-American, well-known in the Farsi-speaking internet, very supportive of the Palestinians, very anti-imperialist. He's going to be speaking. Garland Nixon. You all know Garland Nixon, the radio host. He's going to be speaking. David Rovics, the folk musician. He's going to be playing music, and he's going to be speaking. This is an all-star conference. I don't think we've ever had a lineup this good, right? This is an all-star lineup, if there ever was one. It's going to be great. It's going to be absolutely awesome. So we need you to come. We need you to attend. So if you're coming, let us know that you are coming. Let us know that you are coming, because we could really use the RSVPs. We got 88 people signed up right now. So the room holds 250. So there's still plenty of room. Register for the conference. If you're coming, please go ahead and register. Link is down below. Link is here in the chat so that we know you're coming. We're hoping that we have enough money to get food for people, but we need to know how much food to bring. So please register. If you're coming, please go ahead and register for the event so that we know that you are coming. There you go. And as I said, it's paid for, but it's a tight squeeze. We're trying to figure out how to bring a second cameraman so that Peter doesn't have to do all the video work himself while he's speaking. We're trying to figure out how to bring different people from around the country. We're trying to figure out how to get food. We still haven't figured out if food is in the budget, right? So we could really use your support. If you think it's important for events like this to happen, send a donation. Send a donation. I've suggested that if you can, just send us $5, right? If you can just afford to do $5, right? If there's plenty of people watching this that can give us $5, give us $5 to do the conference. If you think conferences like this are important, you're watching this now, you're watching this tomorrow or the next day, just drop $5 on the Give, Send, Go. Not hard. Drop $5. You can be anonymous. You can give us a beautiful message that I'll probably even show on these streams. You know, it'll help. Every little bit helps. We'd like to have food there for people. We'd like to, have proper accommodation for out-of-town volunteers, etc. So just drop us $5 if you can. That would be awesome. So there you go, folks. It's 3 hours and 5 minutes. It's been a great stream. My plan as of now is for Thanksgiving to do a marathon stream on Thanksgiving. I need to do a marathon stream on Thanksgiving. That is my plan. So, we'll see how that goes. I'm thinking I'm going to try to do 8 hours of streaming on Thanksgiving. 4 in the morning, 4 at night. That is my goal, to do a marathon stream on Thanksgiving. So wish me luck with that. And I guess we're done for tonight, but I'll be back probably tomorrow, if not sooner. In the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.